started with paganism, magic, and the occult. And the first thing I thought would be very important for us is to share the definitions of each. Many people have different definitions. And actually, even before I do that, let me share with you why. Why should you listen to me on these topics, for that matter, right? Who is this guy? What does he know? Um, those of you that have been following me know that I have been a practicing pagan for since 1990. 1990. So I don't know how many years that is. I don't want to age myself. I've been a practicing pagan since 1990. I was a philosophy major in college with a focus on ontology, which is the philosophy of the divine or God, etc., etc. I did drop out of college and did not finish getting that degree because my philosophy teacher said, don't bother getting a degree. You're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and never be able to make a penny off of it. He said, you're basically better off going online and getting your degree online, which is what I did. I got a Doctor of Metaphysics from one of these online hokey schools or whatever. Got the little certificate. And it doesn't mean that I didn't do the work. While I was doing the work, again, my focus was on metaphysics, and the paper that I had to turn in was on the history and metaphysics of witchcraft. So that was like my shining moment during college. As well, of course, I've been involved with all different types of covens. I was initiated as a Gardnerian high priest, and I do that because we're going to talk about different denominations in just a minute. Gardnerian third degree high priest back in like 94 maybe. Ended up growing a big group. The group got even bigger. We overtook the entire neighborhood practically. They splintered off, went into their own groups. I moved to Florida, started another group in South Beach. You can imagine what that group was like. We were young and wild, and it was a wild time in my life. And I don't regret it, but things got a little crazy in a good way and some bad ways. But again, it was a part of the growing process. And I'm going to get into the whole initiation process as we move forward. I guess in the 90s, I got involved. Later in the 90s, I got involved with the Unitarian Fellowship of South Florida. Got involved with their CUPS group. Became the facilitator for that / teacher or whatever. And I had several covens here and there. I kind of dropped out of the whole coven thing after my last. I don't want to say my last initiations, but yeah, it was like I finished the 5 degrees. We had 5 degrees in that tradition, which was an Egyptian-based tradition, mostly dealing with Egyptian magic and Isis and the belief system, the reconstructed version of the Kemetic religion, for lack of a better term. That's why I love having people like Stephen Mailer and Patricia Ayan on the show, because I can relate to all of that. That was what I studied, and that's what I was initiated in. So I moved up to Roanoke, kind of went solo for a little while, and started a group called Earth Spirit Roanoke, which we met regularly, about weekly, for about 5 years, and now we're just teaching classes and doing public ceremony. And because I feel that for many of us, paganism, the magic, and or the occult is a personal form of spirituality. What I call my coven or my grove, it's called the Star Mountain Grove, is literally me and the people that I want to do ceremony with. It's by invitation only, people I feel very comfortable with, and that's okay. You know, there's all different types of covens out there, and we'll talk about that. But before we go any further, let's go into that whole idea of definition. Paganism, magic, the occult, what do they mean? They all kind of overlay into each other. And as I move forward, let me just share, because I know we have a lot of book witches out there, which are great, and you know your history and whatnot. And we have a lot of traditionals, and we have a lot of probably Golden Dawn practitioners or whatever it may be. I can only share with you my experience. So this is not written in stone. What I'm saying, I say from my perception, my perspective, and my, I guess, 30 years, wow, of experience in these forms of religious and spiritual practices and tradition. So pagan, what's a pagan? If we go classically, and we talked a little bit about it last week in the show, if we go classically, paganism is basically pre-Christian or pre-Judaic religion. It was all over the world. All the indigenous cultures are pagan religion. Now, many of them have converted in modern times to Christianity and other religion, but basically, for me, pagan is earth-based religion, earth-based spirituality, dealing with the cycles of nature and the cycles of the stars and the planets and what have you. And then we move on to like neo-paganism. Neo-paganism is the modern aspect of that. Neo-paganism includes a lot of reconstructionist paganism, like the reconstruction of Druidry or the reconstruction of Celtic religion. And as well, neo-pagan can include other forms of hybrid religion. And again, I'm just going into the definition. We'll go further in depth as we move through the series. Then let's talk about magic. And when I say magic, I mean magic with a K. I believe K was added. Believe it was Aleister Crowley who started the K to differentiate the difference between illusion, the illusionist, pick a card, any card, and magic using energy to create change and confirmation with will. Magic is a part of paganism. It can be, and again, not all pagans practice magic. But magic with a K is usually, and again, for me, it is associated with Western esoteric practice. What is that Western esoteric practice? Western esoteric practice would be like the Golden Dawn, the Ordo Templis Orientis, Freemasonry is another Western esoteric. So there's many of them out there. When you always hear about these lodges, those are usually Western esoteric forms of magical groups. So what is the difference between paganism and magic? Magic with a K, for me, really is the main difference is one is based on Abrahamic belief. Most magic and ceremonial magic is based on Abrahamic belief and the belief of Jehovah, Yud He Vav He. You hear it all the time. So it's a Christianized version of magic, of witchcraft. It deals with mostly the belief system within that is that there is only one God, the all-seeing eye. You've seen that in the Freemasonry symbols. It's very monotheistic, even though they do incorporate other gods into their practices. I guess the best way to look at it is that there is the all one God in magic, but there's also the gods, which I guess could be utilized for their energies, and actually that's not far off from what I believe. But for me, and again, this is just for me, paganism is more, for me, it's more goddess oriented. It's more matrifocal. It's not patriarchal. You'll find that pagan groups versus magical groups are less hierarchical, whereas in magical group there is always hierarchy. And a lot of that has been pulled over into paganism and witchcraft. And we see a lot of that in Gerald Gardner's reconstructionism of modern witchcraft, which is now what we call Wicca. He brought in a lot of those Freemasonic elements and beliefs. And so, I was invited somewhere recently, or was at a couple of events, and it was like, oh no, you're the oldest, you go first. And I'm like, I appreciate the respect, but it's kind of hierarchical. I'm like, we're all equal. Yes, thank you for respecting that I've maybe been doing this the longest, but I don't expect to go first just because of my age or because I'm male or because I'm the priest or whatever. So you will see hierarchy in a lot of these types of groups. And again, you see a lot of that being pulled into modern Wicca. So that's kind of the difference between pagan and magic. Again, one is, actually let me expand on that a little bit. Magic would include ceremonial magic, high magic, again, groups like Golden Dawn, etc. You can always just look up ceremonial magic and high magic to learn the difference. One of the ways that I was taught the difference was that pagan means of the hearth or of the heath. They lived in the lowlands. They worship the gods of nature, kind of like, the indigenous uh, stayed along with nature. And as Christianity came along and the kingdom started coming and becoming more, hierarchical, the richer, wealthier elites would live up on the higher, the higher mountains and whatnot. The castles were always at the top of the mountain or the top of the hill, and they adopted their magic to conform with Christian beliefs, and that's why it's called high magic, because they were of a higher elevation. That's all it meant. Doesn't mean that it was better or worse. It just means they were doing it at a higher elevation. So that's the difference between pagan and again, a loose difference or definition of pagan and magic with a K. We'll get into the whole idea of energy and, black magic, white magic, chaos magic, all those things. We'll get into that later. But just traditionally speaking, for the definitions. And lastly, of course, is the occult. Very interesting. The occult sounds spooky. It sounds scary. It's supposed to be. And the reason why it's supposed to be is because all the occult means is something that is hidden, something that is not seen. Anything that is kept secret or anything that is not in the public eye could be defined as occult. It means hidden. It means secret. So when we're hearing the negativity of all things occult or whatnot, all that fear and actually all that propaganda is probably to sell TV shows and books and religion. A lot of that fear-based stuff is a misunderstanding of what a simple word that means hidden or secretive is. So, the occult. What is the occult? In modern terminology, the occult could be anything from mediumship to astral projection to UFOs. Anything that is not known or understood. And we'll go into some of the different types of occult practices a little bit later. I think it's fair to say in modern terminology that a lot of the dark arts fall under the occult, because most of us who practice positive, I don't want to even call it positive, I don't want to become dualistic in all of this, so please bear with me. There is no dualism when we actually get to understand it's all one energy. And actually, I'll define that now. Magic is neither good nor bad. Now, are there different definitions in different traditions? Yeah, there are different definitions in different traditions. But magic is no different than prana or chi or universal life force. It just is. It depends on what you do with it. Like electricity can go ahead and get started with paganism, magic, and the occult. And the first thing I thought would be very important for us is to share the definitions of each. Many people have different definitions. And actually, even before I do that, let me share with you why. Why should you listen to me on these topics, for that matter, right? Who is this guy? What does he know? Um, those of you that have been following me know that I have been a practicing pagan for since 1990. 1990. So I don't know how many years that is. I don't want to age myself. I've been a practicing pagan since 1990. I was a philosophy major in college with a focus on ontology, which is the philosophy of the divine or God, etc., etc. I did drop